The following is a production of KYNE TV in cooperation with UNO Television. Consider This with Carol Schrader, a news and informational program recorded on the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. Here is your host, Carol Schrader.
Welcome to the Milo Bale Student Center. I'm Carol Schrader, and I want to say, consider this. Could we have done anything different, and are we happy with what we did? Well, three of the people that had a real hand in sort of getting us through the last 2 weeks are with us today. Hal Dobb, the mayor of the city of Omaha, is with us today. Thank you for taking time. I know he's been on a tight schedule today. Another man who's been run ragged is Fred Peterson. It's like a household name.
Too much so, I'm afraid.
President of the Omaha Public Power District. And I'd also like to welcome Major General Stanley Hague, who is the director. He has many titles, but in this case, it's director of the Nebraska Emergency Management Agency. It used to be known as Civil Defense. You're still in defense of our civility.
That's correct.
I'm sure. I know people have heard this, and I want to give everybody a break off the bat and say, how do you prepare, other than having a plan? How can you even imagine what we had this past 2 weeks? Could you?
Well,
Could you have imagined that you would have?
I think what's hard about it is that people don't imagine it's going to happen to them. And I think that when you think about the World Trade Center bombing, the Murtaugh bombing in Oklahoma City, when you think about the flood in Des Moines several years ago, the devastating ice storm in Nebraska City several years ago, worse than what hit us this time in terms of tree damage, think about Fargo and the floods, then what you know is globally every day things like this are happening, so it could happen to you. So the answer is be prepared, because it can happen and does happen to all of us at some point somewhere in our lives in one way or another. And so, but at the instant it happens and you look out there and you wonder, gosh, have we, wow, what are we going to do now? And if you've got your plans together, and human beings are wonderful. I mean, they respond. Omahans and generally Nebraskans and Iowans just responded. And all the workers of our utility companies and the various agencies of city and county government, state government, really got together and really worked hard. We've had a tough 8 days, or 9 days, but I think things are proceeding quite well.
Okay, let's talk about plans. Fred, how do you, and I'll give you each a chance, we all have plans, but I remember we've had several things happen to us in the last few years, or let's go back 20 a little more, to the tornado and the blizzard of 75, and those are the ones that stand out to. Afterwards, we heard post-mortem, get a plan. How does OPPD plan for something like this that just visually overwhelmed me?
Carol, that's an interesting question, because we've been criticized for not having planned enough, and I will tell you this, we have a plan, we have a comprehensive plan, it's a written plan, gives details on every step you take. There are 3 levels of emergency, and we moved into the 3rd level of emergency, and I don't think people have really stepped back and looked at the problem. And I've cited some examples of our planning. Our vehicles all perform well because we have an excellent preventive maintenance program. We didn't run out of supplies because we have an excellent storeroom and inventory program. And these things don't just happen, we plan. We didn't have any injuries or any life-threatening injuries or fatalities, and that's because we plan all year long and have for many years on a safety basis. We teach our employees safety, and so there's a tremendous amount of planning that goes into it, and we did do a lot of planning. And then the key to probably the most important part is that we're going to spend $11 million, that's our estimate, for restoration and getting us back to normal. And we're going to do that without a rate increase, which we think indicates some financial planning and corporate-wide planning. But then you get to a point where when you have a storm that is 4 times as devastating as anything you've ever experienced, 10 times as expensive as what the tornado restoration was, you cannot recover from those kind of storms in a very short period of time. You simply can't, regardless of your plans. You only have limited resources as far as manpower goes. The utility, or the people being served by the utility, don't want to pay to have another 200 crews or 150 crews standing by. So we had to go out to other utilities and ask them to come in, as they've done with us in the past. So there is a tremendous amount of planning that goes into it. But when you hit a storm that's far greater than any you've ever experienced before, we use the analogy, it's like if there was a fire on every corner. The best plans of any fire department in the world would not be able to address all of those at one time. And so
And you can get a visual on that if you think back to the earthquake the night of the World Series and the fires that were going on. You could see them
yes.
from the air. I mean,
and
you get
I
a
don't
visual
mean that
kind
to be
of,
an attack
no,
on any fire department
no,
at all.
No, but
I'm
I think
just
you can
trying
get
to
kind of a visual
get a
registration.
relationship there as to the problems that develop when you experience a disaster that is of a magnitude far greater than anything you've ever experienced before.
General Heng, you have a kind of a different thing. You don't have a jurisdiction per se geographically. You have all of Nebraska, but I mean, for you to plan is a little different. It's an employment of troops, so to speak, literally and figuratively, to wherever they're needed. But you are only. Let me ask this: I suppose the Guard could do anything. I'm
Thank you.
sure. But I mean, you're only sort of fit and outfitted to do certain things, and so do you immediately go according to the plan of what can we provide when, or do you wait for someone to ask you?
Well, in answer to that question, and certainly I agree with everything that Mayor Daub and Mr. Peterson has said here, that this was so massive, if you will, and overwhelming. You know, the response to any of that takes a little longer. As far as our emergency operating center, we activated early Sunday morning just as soon as we became aware of what the situation was. We didn't know how far and wide it was, but from those people in Lincoln who work in the operations center, they knew that it could be bad. We started calling around and found out, and we got some reports from the field, from our offices out in the field, that just what was out there, and we knew that there would be some problems. We were a little bit fortunate, lucky, I guess, if you will, that we had guard training that weekend.
So they were sort of there.
They were
captive.
there. A lot of our members who live more than 50, 60 miles away from the unit that they train with will stay overnight at our facilities. We had several soldiers that did that. So they were on the ground and ready to go, so to speak. But beyond that, our regular plans of calling up as needed as soon as we got the missions in, and obviously had a declaration from then acting Governor Kim Roback, which occurred fairly early Sunday morning. It just built from there, if you will.
Is working in the ambulatory service that you were enlisted into very quickly to some of the harder to reach areas, is that traditionally one of the first things in a other than to restore order in a riot situation?
Yes, it comes early on, because if you have a disaster such as this, where either the streets are not navigable with regular ambulances, or they just can't get through because of the depth of the snow before the streets get cleared, but that's not unusual. And then delivering people to their places of work who are essential, much as nurses, that sort of thing.
I think it's important to note that the governor and the National Guard leadership and the OPPD electric service leadership have a whole lot bigger piece of terrain and many more people to assess, to evaluate, and to figure out accurate, usable, workable deployment that's going to make a difference.
Well, one of the reasons
our piece was just a smaller piece of it, arguably the city of Omaha, but every square inch of our 120 square miles and our 4,000 miles of streets and all had its circumstance. But there was a difference, I think, in our case about whether it was a disaster and shutting down the city, or whether it was an emergency, whereas the whole statewide impact was clearly, with cattle and rural sub-problems as well, clearly disastrous. Our problem was getting help to people right away and being of service to everybody on a public safety side, and our 911 system clearly had to handle the calls, and our police, fire, and rescue had to get their job done, and were at that point through their second shift waiting for third shift to come in because they couldn't get in. They were over their time and working on a tired framework. So you're looking at maybe some apples and oranges in the logic.
That's one of the reasons that I asked
I think that's
the
real
three
important
of
to
you.
understand. The proportion that they deal with was far greater than the proportion that I had to deal with.
And the reason I asked the three of you in particular here was because of the different dynamics and dimensions of what you were doing. You're the mayor of Omaha. You have a set geographical area. Granted, the problems were a lot of things that had to be sorted out. You had to sort of worry about the whole picture, but of a certain area. Fred, you were spread out.
Let me give you a perfect example of exactly what he's talking about. we were working with the mayor and his people on the 911 systems and trying to ensure that we could get power restored to those systems as quickly as possible. They're key to the communications, the emergency communications of the area. At the same time, we're working with mayors of other communities. I remember working with the mayor of Bellevue and the people in Bellevue on some lift stations for sewage disposal problems that they were having. So we're working with cities all over our service territory on various issues. But
The different fallout from power being lost.
right, but they were all critical at the time. And so I think that
And the smaller
demonstrates
cities, with all due respect from my point of view, had less resources in a circumstance like this, which is a logical, understandable thing compared to a larger city like
You
Omaha.
have
So
more
the Guard
places
had
you
some
can
value
shift.
elsewhere. First, and Lincoln's water supply was down on top of their power and their tree problems. So they had a particular problem at the state capitol that was immense in terms of dealing with that. So when a storm comes, being prepared has many facets to it.
I should have mentioned earlier, Carol, another thing that we do in the Guard, we pre-position certain items of equipment at armories along the interstate because we know the interstate's going to be something that people travel, they'll get stranded, and in addition to helping the Nebraska State Patrol extract people from stranded vehicles on the interstate and take them to a shelter, whether it be one of our National Guard armories, but we'll keep Hummers, Humvees with chains on and trucks with chains on at armories along with generators and that we do that early in the fall every year. We know that somewhere, someplace on that interstate we'll use that equipment in Nebraska in the winter.
Assuredly. At least
There's
one
no
time.
doubt about it.
All right, so some of the key areas that, I think you could all sit back from the people that have to shoulder the ultimate responsibility, but you all had different communication problems. And I think that we always say wherever I've worked is, gee, we're in the communication business, but we're not really good communicators. But communication was a key fact, not just like 911, but communication, intercommunication, people being able to communicate with you. We find here we have the most sophisticated communications possibilities ever in the history of mankind, and yet because you don't anticipate this kind of storm,
Well, let me give you an example.
you're stretched, you're drained.
Give you an example. Murtaugh, man-made disaster of the bombing that took more lives in a situation like that than in our history in the United States. When that happened, the media moved in with their trucks and their little
Oh no, I
cranes,
can't believe they did
and
that.
the cell phone system, because of the way cellular phones are allocated and how they communicate.
Let me tell you, it happens a night of an Orange Bowl in Miami.
Right, and you literally find that your cell phone, not just your landline system if its power is out,
Yeah, it's
but
overloaded.
the cell phone system can also just jam up, and you end up going back to the days when you sent runners between camps to
Ham
get
radio
messages delivered,
operators.
and react and ham. So in our case, with the disaster in our metropolitan area, our 911 was being overloaded with information calls, not emergency calls. So our job was to get our hotline up and running, to lift that call burden off of them so they could do their job and we could become informational and help people with less than life-threatening circumstances. And turned out, I think we were helpful to OPPD
Yes, you were.
in getting through their overload on their conventional phone system. And so we all worked together on this, and in a way I think things get clearer as you step back from it and as days go by. But we had a communication problem that was simply one we could resolve, and we resolved ours on Sunday at 8 o'clock in the morning, but we were prepared for that because our daily routine requirements are to handle a whole lot more phone communication in a big city than
Yours is
than normal.
sporadic,
Ours-
even in a normal power
And,
outage.
and we're the first to acknowledge that we didn't do well. We had 30 phones, we had 20, and we could crank up to 30 phone lines coming into our Energy Control Center. And I have to tell you, we look back on it now, and we're going to look back on it in far greater depth in the future. But as we're looking back now, the initial look, we had those 30 phones going. They were working fine for restoration purposes. We were getting enough information so we knew where the power was out, but we weren't effectively communicating from the customer standpoint, and they were frustrated, and that frustration grew and grew and grew, and it took us several days before we corrected the problem.
I felt your pain, Fred.
Well, yes, you did, because you had the mayor's hotline, and you were getting the calls, and we were exchanging information and calls on a regular basis, and it was helpful because you had another 10, 12 lines over there that were taking calls all day long, and they deliver stacks of paper about every few hours, a couple inches thick. And so, we would go to some of the radio stations, and when we'd leave, someone from the back room would walk out and hand us a page of addresses and phone numbers that were without power. So we recognized that we didn't do well in that, and it was a communications problem. The other one that we didn't do well at was the estimates of number of people that were out and the projections of when service would be restored again. We had never dealt with a storm of this magnitude. We didn't realize for a few days what we were dealing with, and so we were probably premature making those projections, but we did it. I would only say that it did not affect the restoration process. It only affected the attitude and the feelings of the people.
Which you know, particularly as it drug on. But your estimates were up to speed after a while. But your communication problems are different altogether.
That's correct. Yes.
You know, at least you don't have people calling in and saying your power's out.
Yes, that's true.
Oh, the guard armories here were getting all sorts. I mean, the same kind of calls that I think the city and the OPPD were getting. They were fielding the same kind of calls, and their phone lines were being jammed. But you have radios.
Right. Yes. We didn't have too big of a problem with that this time, Carol. I don't know of any situation that we really got bound up on us. Like Mr. Peterson said, in our emergency operating center, we can expand from however many phones we have to 30 or 40 greater if we need to, just like that. Now, we took a lot of calls on the initial day, like Mayor Dobbs said, when they couldn't get through on the electric system and couldn't get through to whomever else, Public Works, they'll try any emergency number. So
in our case, the phone calls weren't just power now. You've got people with home battery-powered but dead batteries on their respirator system, on their home dialysis unit, on their power lifts that get them in and out of bed or their wheelchairs. People who were going to fill their prescriptions on Sunday at the local pharmacy, they're now out of their pharmacy and medications. People that have their oxygen bottles empty. Our emergency requirements were also to put shelters, comfort stations, get people to and from places, get things for them, get the streets open, get sort of back to work oriented, figure out what you do with school, make sure your drop-off sites are ready. And so our communications network had to handle, if you looked at it in total, I think probably as many calls as any other organization statewide had to handle, because ours in a large metropolitan area dealt with a variety of other circumstances, proving one thing: how dependent we've become on electricity in all of the walks of life. And I think it's real
said
important.
In the newsroom, I said, and we think we have control.
Yeah.
I mean, but for the grace of God and a good tweaking and some transformers, we do. This is the one thing that I noticed after 20 years and having seen the tornado and working in a repertorial position then, is that the one thing that they said coming out of the tornado of '75 and the blizzard was that if we ever had anything like this again, the jurisdictions were going to work publicly together. And I didn't see that at all. Now, there may have been some working behind the scenes, but we had our listeners at KFAB, and I'm not saying that we were the be-all and the end-all, but we really noticed in trying to communicate with them that we couldn't say, here are all the drop-off sites. We couldn't say, because OPPD covers several city jurisdictions and more than one county, you know, this is the number to call, like the mayor's hotline for the spillover. That there was, perhaps out of this could be, I mean, we have MAPA, we have Metro Area Planning Agency, we have Pottawatomie County, but for the grace of God is on another side of a river. But those people, although I had a different electric company, they can't blame you for it. There was real inability to get information out to all the people. You did a good job with Omaha, and as Boyd called it into us, but the system was not set for mass communicating and the whole area.
Carol, I'm not sure.
And maybe it shouldn't be.
I'm not sure that I agree with that totally. And I think if you look at Sunday afternoon at 4 o'clock, or 5, I think the first one was at 5 o'clock, and Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock, Tuesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, 4 days in a row, there was a press conference held that was coordinated by the mayor's office, but it had the Omaha Public School Systems there, MUD, I believe, was there at one of them. The U.S. West was there. We were there at all of them.
County.
The county was there. So I think there were now maybe there could have been more, but I want to say that I think that the governmental agencies and even the private sector had stepped forward, and we all worked together pretty well.
Well, good.
The General and I, first Lieutenant Governor Robach and I talked early in the morning on Sunday. The General and I talked before
Sunday
the 5
night.
o'clock press conference, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
Right.
Fred and I talked at 8 o'clock in the morning, or 7:30 in
Yes.
the
Well,
morning.
good. I'm
And then
glad
again at noon.
that it
and
worked,
We
that you
we
feel
met
it
at
worked.
2, we met at 4, we press conference. I think we all agreed getting information out was extremely critical. I do have to say, though, that we can do better at that. And I believe there are improvements
what
and I think that's where
postmortems
you were.
are for.
And the best practices and after action review, and there'll be a time for that here when
Absolutely.
we get all through this, is going to be very helpful, I believe. I chaired the Emergency Preparedness and Disaster Relief Subcommittee of the National League of Cities, and I'm active in that field on a
And you said
conference
that
of
you had
mayors,
just
and
recently
we rewrote our
updating.
snow plan. We rewrote and practiced our piece in a very complicated intergovernmental relationship. And so we had thought about this a bit, but I don't know what some of the better practices might be yet, because I don't know their businesses. And
Well, I
I'm
do
I'm
know-
learning a lot about them, but I don't know their businesses. So I think we have some room for improvement.
And
We'll get
maybe-
after that here. one of
I'm
these
not
days.
trying to be unfair, because we've had complaints from city administrators from outlying cities that we weren't able to give the whole picture, and I can take some of the blame on that. But when you,
Carol, I took some of that too, and I acknowledged it after the first day or two, and I think I was overly casual, and I would talk about Omaha, and I was neglecting to mention Carter Lake and Bellevue, and believe me, both those lady mayors corrected me on that, and there are a lot of other communities in our service territory that were affected, and it was, from my perspective, again, I think that's something I need to be more conscious of in communication.
and we did too when we were talking, we'd say Omaha this and Omaha that, and maybe it was just a public relations problem when
it was with
we
us.
spoke.
Can I say that, I watched the Guard when they got to Omaha establish their communication system for the job they're supposed to do. And when they got to Omaha, they not only did a great job, but you can go into Florence and the north part of our city and the Old River Corridor and into South Omaha and see right this very moment the results of their ability to communicate, to get their people here, their equipment here, to get liaison with the city and the county and with neighborhood associations and get in there and get the job done. The Power District clearly has a lot more territory and a different kind of a communicating problem. There's an inbound and an outbound internal communication.
Absolutely.
And ours was only quickly related to one thing, and that was making sure that we heard people. Our job, we kind of know what that is, but helping people is a peculiar kind of communication requirement, and so we take drop off from anybody. I don't care if they live in the city limits or not, they're all welcome. We take spoil food at our sites. We've helped every community around us since Sunday afternoon. We've told them, bring your trees, limbs, and debris, bring your spoil food, use our shelters. So in that vein, the city of Omaha reached out in our
And
plan
it is
and
the
helped
largest
everybody.
city. It has the ability to do that. Now, we don't have a lot of time left. I want to ask a couple of, not grilling questions, but when there is a postmortem, after you've worked with a consultant on getting a better handle on a very difficult problem, as I said, communication is often the worst and most difficult problem. Will we be hearing about it so that we know what the plan is?
And we're not calling it a postmortem because we don't think there are any bodies, and we hope there won't be. But when we complete our review, we're going to make it a public document. We don't use autopsy either, Carol.
Well, I didn't use.
But it will be public, yes.
And is the city going to be able to, and the county, the whatever jurisdictional area, the MAPA area, how many counties in the MAPA? Is it 5, 6?
So we all have a continuing concern. First, to continue to keep public safety, be it a down wire that's still out there somewhere, be it the potential for inclement weather to bring us more adverse weather that would mean rain and more down power wires or more down phone lines or
High
more need
winds.
for
And
guarding
we're all
and cleanup.
keeping our fingers
And
crossed
so as
on
the
that.
temperatures cool and we get into our inclement weather season here, getting to Thanksgiving and getting to Christmas and getting the cleanup done and getting kids safely off sidewalk or back onto sidewalks.
Well,
a lot
the
of
reason
things.
I asked that, and
Very
we are
serious.
running out of time here, is
very serious.
is that we could have a blizzard in 2
Sure.
weeks. So that's why, that sort of. I'm not asking it to be pesky.
Well, the city's ready. We're ready.
And we're ready to. We're not as ready today as we will be in 2 weeks because we still have a lot of temporary fixes out
Absolutely.
there. But we're maintaining some extra crews to make permanent fix, and we'll be ready.
Those trees, you know,
Yes.
those trees that are
Yes.
now lining the streets that were once up lining the
Yes.
streets.
Yes.
They're a safety concern from many fronts too, just because
Yes.
being able to see around a corner,
Yes.
stuff blowing in streets as the winds pick up. How do we get a handle on what seems? I mean, those trees could be there. I mean, I'm not saying you aren't doing a good job. There's tons of them.
I think we want to be very realistic here. We've got a huge debris removal assignment ahead. We finished phase 1 in the city, and there are still communities all around us that are working, I think, in the same logical progression. Get the streets open first for emergency purposes and for work-related assignments.
Just a quick
Secondly,
guesstimate, because I got to let the general.
streets
say
are
it.
open. Right? Most of the streets have at least one lane, if not two. Now you have still some signal lights that are out in our city. You still have corners, like you said, that are piled high with debris, and it's getting higher and higher. And while the temperatures weather-wise go down, people's time will begin to turn to those piles, and then their patience will begin to wear thin on the trees.
Because I think
We've
it's-
got
yeah.
a removal project that says get it to the curbside. The city of Omaha will not only be helpful to our residents, but we have drop-off sites, and if 1 out of 2 homes would somehow in the next 4 weeks take responsibility for getting their debris to a drop-off site, and there's 21 of them in our regional area here that are open from 7 in the morning, mostly till 10 at night, 7 days a week. That'll help. We're going to have a neighborhood association cleanup in our city that will start next week as soon as we understand FEMA reimbursement. And we'll find some more wires for you, Fred, but we'll coordinate on that, and we'll need more National Guard help in every city across this area.
Okay, well, I only
But
have 1
we'll
minute, and I
coordinate.
got to get to that National
We'll
Guard help.
coordinate.
You're standing down tomorrow to get your people home to rest, get your equipment back up to speed, and
Right. We came on in full force a week ago tomorrow, last Friday, the Friday after the storm, because it was at that time that the power lines got identified. We could work safely into the areas, into the streets. And at one time, we had about 1,050, 1,080 on duty throughout the state. That went for a few days, and then we would dwindle off. And I think today we've got like 700 and some. It'll probably be down to 500 and some tomorrow. But then we must stand down. The Department of Roads of the state of Nebraska has been a big player in this because they have the trucks, the dump trucks that can haul this sort of thing. The military does not. We do not have that sort of equipment in Nebraska. Very, very limited. So we'll continue to work with those communities that have a legitimate, if you will, emergency-related issue, much as the mayor said, with piles of debris on street corners where visibility is hampered.
And the Army Reserve has now been activated, and we'll have them probably tomorrow with 100 trucks and 600 people, and we're going to have some
Well, I
help.
think it's like, I think they said it's 20 trucks and 100 people, I think is what they're going to do for the
100
week.
pieces of equipment, so I
Okay.
don't know how
Well,
many
that's
trucks,
good.
but bobcats, loaders, dump trucks.
well, we are out of
Good.
time. I know you have all been about mediated out. Wanted to give you, though, a little more than just a sound bite. Thank you so much. And believe it or not, I'm very proud to live in this state after what has happened and how well people have responded. Mayor
Thanks.
Dobb, Fred Peterson, Major General Stanley Haig, thank you for joining us on Consider This. Good luck the next few weeks. And thank you.